Hello and welcome to Stupid Ancient History with Midgley
and Taylor and our expert, non-expert and special guest, the amazing James, hegemon of all things science and wearer of fancy lab coats.
I am amazing.
You are amazing, James.
As always, we're wearing togas, we're eating olives, and today we're going to look at the changes made by Philip II to the Macedonian army. Previously on Stupid Ancient History, we've been looking at some of the background to the rise of Alexander the Great in the 4th century in Greece.
So particularly the rise of Macedonia from a sleeping, if somewhat wild and chaotic giant to the main force in Greece.
What are we calling it? Macedonia or Macedon?
Pick which one you like.
They're interchangeable.
Yeah, same thing. And we've looked at how, largely ignored in the previous century, Macedonia was in fact a vast resource-rich part of Greece.
With lots of gold and mineral wealth and particularly large flat plains for breeding and training horses.
And how, after a string of assassinated kings in Macedonia, Philip II, Alexander's dad, becomes king.
And wasted no time at all either marrying his way to a position of strength or failing that just went and invaded people.
Saxon swords. Clearly works.
It did.
Yeah.
And we're left with Philip becoming hegemon of the League of Corinth, effectively making him the supreme military leader of all of Greece.
Which is handy.
If you're looking to go to war.
Yeah.
Fair play. So, from your preamble, I can guess that Philip's success is largely due to going and beating people up.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, James.
So, he's a bit of a bully, is it safe to say?
Well, ambitious, let's just say.
So, he just goes around stabbing people.
Yeah.
Is that his key? That is his super secret recipe for success?
Well, yeah.
Stab him with a pointy end.
Well, he does make some quite important changes to the Greek military.
Okay.
Particularly the Macedonian army.
So even though they're not, there's no centralised Greece, do they all still fight in a very similar vein?
Yeah, they do. So obviously, before we look at what Philip did, it helps if we look at what Greek warfare was like before he turns up.
Yeah, because don't forget, this was what he was up against when he was scrapping with the rest of the Greeks.
Right, so he knows the good and bad parts of it.
Yeah.
Because he's fought them.
Yeah. So prior to Philip II, the Greeks basically used to fight using hoplite and a phalanx.
So they use that against the Persians, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and each other as well. So basically, a hoplite
Okay.
is a type of ancient heavy infantry with an emphasis on protecting the soldier and creating an impenetrable human wall.
Okay.
Yeah, so hoplites are distinguishable by primarily this large round hoplon shield, which is made of wood but with a bronze cap. This big enormous shield that's there to protect them, and an 8-foot dory spear for stabbing from behind the shield, and a little short sword called a xiphos.
Okay.
Yeah. They also have kind of a very heavy, usually bronze or leather armour and helmets which protected almost all of the head.
Okay. So they're pretty well armoured, aren't they? They're sorted out. Apart from the shins are armoured.
Yeah, no, the shins were armoured. Basically, it's only the crotch that isn't.
Just the bit in the skirt.
Yeah.
That's what you aim for then.
Yeah.
Right, so if Greeks use this to fight each other, how did two phalanxes fight each other? Because you've got two massive blocks just getting smashed together.
Pretty much. I mean, but yeah, the whole point is it's very, very heavy armour. Everything's made out of bronze. It's really quite thick.
Very slow, I'm
Very
assuming.
slow. They're not into running around and things like that.
So it's not Gerard Butler in nothing, basically. A little cloth flipping about and...
Yeah, no, I hate to say it, but the film...
Mrs. Taylor looks devastated.
There's no
film
twirling.
300 may have lied to you on that one.
Yeah, no twirling,
They do talk a bit about that, about the necessity to protect the person next to you. So that is accurate.
Yeah, that's as far as it goes, really.
Right, okay.
But not to protect their bits. They clearly weren't bothered about having lots of children.
So if a Greek's fighting a Greek, how do they fight? Just two big, impenetrable blocks of people?
Yeah, I mean, the basic formation adopted by the Greeks was the phalanx.
Yeah, so this was kind of this very big, tightly packed, mobile shield wall. So this is where the shield became really important because it was not only protecting kind of the man holding it, but it was also protecting the man who was kind of to their left as well.
Right, so it's probably quite intimidating. That's marching towards you.
I would say so. And
Probably marching towards you very slowly.
I was going to say, can you also imagine the sound as well?
Yeah, fair enough.
That would be really
so
quite
how many men make up a phalanx?
It varies, over 200 sometimes.
Right, okay.
But yeah, it would have been massively intimidating because there's so much emphasis on protection. These phalanxes obviously move quite slowly and, like I said, directly towards each other.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so they're a bit like a heavily armoured rugby scrum.
Fair enough.
Or like the start of a game of American football.
Why are you talking about American football?
Well, you
He wrote it in the script.
You line up against each other, you jump into each other, see what happens.
Fair
And
enough.
Sounds
obviously,
like date night.
What?
oh, let's right.
We'll
let's move on. From
We'll
there.
sail past that one.
Yeah. So, and obviously, this is going to be worse now. Obviously, you've got this shield wall, but poking out from behind those shields are kind of rows and rows of spears, just waiting to stab you in the face.
Jesus Christ. Right, okay. So I'm somewhat distracted now. Taylor's broken herself. She's useless. So this picture you're showing me, there's one little dweeb at the back. What's he up to?
He's actually really important.
What's he doing?
So a lot of instructions in battle are often communicated through instruments like flutes.
What?
Which is what he's playing at the back.
What? So he just like lays down a fat beat and just tells him what to do.
They're marching to the rhythm.
Yeah.
Too many sweets for you. No more.
Just be glad you couldn't actually see that.
So that's how the rest of Greece
Yep.
fought. How did Philip fight then? If he did, I'm assuming if he like won over the rest of Greece, he must have done something better or different.
Yeah, I mean, Philip kept a lot of the key ideas and tactics used by the Greeks for years, because, if it wasn't broke, don't fix it.
Including the flute man,
the
James.
little jaunty tune man.
Yep, and the phalanx. But there were a few key changes that really made a lot of difference.
Right, so what did he do different? Right, there's a bit of a difference there. I'm going to assume the bloke with the slightly, significantly longer spear is one of Philip's lads.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the most notable difference, James,
It's the massive spear.
is the massive spear. But if we're being technical, then the thing that he did, or he changed in his infantry, was called the sarissa.
Is that black bit in the middle literally where they just gaffer tape two together?
Yeah, I mean, it was so long, it had to be carried in two parts.
All right, fair
So yeah,
enough.
his big military development was this big pointy thing.
So stab them from farther away.
Yeah, I mean, it's an 18-foot pike.
It's-
It's easily 10 feet longer than your traditional Greek spear.
Okay.
And 12 feet longer than anything the Persians used.
Jesus Christ. So just skewer them all.
It's kebab time.
Yeah, how many could he get on that?
Turn him over. So obviously the other Greeks would have real problems just getting near to Philip's men to even kind of try and inflict wounds.
Yeah. I mean, is it... How revolutionary is this? A bigger, pointier stick?
Quite revolutionary.
Okay.
And we should also point out that the Macedonian Phalangites,
That's what?
yeah, that's their name.
That's what they were called.
What's a phalangite?
What are those guys?
Oh, so she said what was the spear called? A sarissa?
Sarissa.
Sarissa. I would assume they were called the Saricites or something like that.
That would sound better, but no, the Phalangites.
Phalangites.
They also have a lot less armour than the other Greeks.
Because they don't need it.
They don't need it, and it means they can move a lot faster.
Yeah,
Right,
so they're
okay.
a lot less kind of clunky, cumbersome,
So the silly name,
Phalangites.
does that just come from the Phalanx?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when you put 256 of these chaps together in a phalanx, as you can see, it's pretty intimidating.
A little bit, yeah.
There's a lot of kebabbing going on.
But there's also quite a clever trick going on at the back.
Is it just that they're even further away so they don't get stabbed?
No, I mean, obviously the guys at the back, they've got to have their sarissas in the air to, not take anyone's eye out.
Yeah.
You know, cumbersome, get in the way.
How tall are these people that their eyes are getting taken out with it?
Yeah, it would be quite annoying though if you kind of impaled your own
Fair enough,
Your
yeah.
own mate.
men.
But
yeah.
because these are so long and tall, it basically makes it really hard for an enemy to see what's going on behind the phalanx.
Yeah, especially if they were moving and kicking up dust and things like that as they were walking.
Right, okay.
So what the Macedonians could do was they could actually move troops behind an advancing phalanx without the enemy really being able to see what was going on. They'd just see this forest of spears pointing upwards.
Right, okay. So when you say troops, were there other units other than the...
Yeah, or it could have been another phalanx.
I've
behind,
already
or
forgotten that stupid name.
It could have been another phalanx. It could have been
Right, okay.
a guy
okay.
on a donkey. It could have been anything.
And presumably they're keeping the flute man safe.
The flute man's also safe
It
at the
could have
back.
been more badass flute players. Flute in one hand, knife in the other. But it wasn't all just about big pointy spears.
Well, they had other people other than the...
Or,
what are they called?
Phalangites.
I've already forgotten.
Yes.
Sorry.
or big long shafts, as Mr. Mitchell's decided to put in there.
I
as
don't know
well.
where you're reading that. So anyway, one of the main problems Greek states had was they didn't have full-time standing armies.
So most cities relied on a small army, and the expectation that the rest of the men will kind of take up arms in the event of war.
So they just went down the high street and was like, Baker, get your armour on. Fisherman, armour on.
I think it's more the fact...
Candlestick maker.
Yeah, and I think it's also more the fact that you would think, well, if I don't go and fight and a village town gets whooped, then basically I'm going to probably be killed, my house will be set on fire, and my wife is probably going to be raped
So
along with my
It's
children.
like a civil militia.
If they didn't have like a standing army, how did all these people have armour and shields?
Well,
and stuff?
traditionally in Greece it'd be like family heirlooms. So Dad would have some armour, and then when he died, you'd take on his armour.
Right, okay.
The expectation was certainly from certain like middle classes, you would be expected as part of your social standing to have the armour, to do a bit of practice every now and again.
Right, okay.
But it wasn't necessarily.
Is that why
a
that
full-time
picture from a couple slides ago had like everyone had like a different
everyone had a
crest
different
on the shield or something like that?
Yeah, different symbol on the shield, because it was all, you bought it yourself. So if you wanted a different picture, you paid someone to get a different picture.
Oh, that guy's got a Medusa head as well. This is embarrassing.
Yeah, that was a bit awkward. So this is one of the things that Philip changed. He saw this is not an ideal situation, and he used Macedonia's wealth to create and basically pay for a full-time professional army where this was their job.
Yeah, which obviously meant that he could train his men harder and for longer because they're getting paid for it, and by doing that he could make them much better at what they did.
Okay.
And obviously with all these ongoing conflicts, they got pretty good at what they did.
and also how he can have everyone hench enough to carry those spears about.
It's your full-time job.
Yeah. Right, so you painted a pretty clear picture of how they beat the other Greeks. They were pros and they had big long spears.
Yeah, but it wasn't just the infantry that was important.
They had horses, didn't they?
Yeah,
Right, okay.
Absolutely. I mean, like many other Greek states, unlike many other Greek states, the Macedonians did make extensive use of cavalry.
I thought you said that wasn't really useful in Greece, though.
The other Greeks didn't necessarily use cavalry because they didn't have the horses
Yeah, okay.
in the significant numbers, really.
Yeah, so it was because the Macedonians had the right landscape for breeding war horses in a significant number, and because of that they became kind of highly regarded as skilled riders.
Okay.
Yeah, they were thinking slightly different to the other Greeks. Other Greeks did use cavalry,
Okay.
but by nowhere as effectively as the Macedonians. So this companion cavalry, as they were called, were really, really well trained. This was a matter of honour to the Macedonian nobility. They were heavily armed and they were very, very effective in battle. They actually perfected this idea of forming a wedge shape and using that wedge shape to attack the enemy lines, usually from the right-hand side of the infantry.
Yeah, so the idea being that they could kind of puncture holes in an enemy's lines and disrupt their formations.
Did they hold their shields in their left hand? Is that why they went from the right? Or
Yeah, it's partly to expose the weak side, but also so everyone knew where they were starting.
right, okay. So it's a bit like just a surprise weapon.
Yeah,
Like-
absolutely. It's a shock weapon. I know what I'd do if a bunch of heavily armoured Greeks on big hefting war horses came charging at me.
I mean,
Run for your life.
Yeah,
yeah.
no second thought about it. It's like, I'm
No,
off.
just leg it. Oh no, I'm weighed down with armour.
Slowly move out of the way.
Okay, so comparing them to the other Greeks, they had the big pointy sarissas. They had shock horses, surprise horses, bad man playing flutes.
Yep.
So they this is why they beat the rest of Greece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they just did things a little bit differently, and it collapsed a nation.
And there's still one thing, there's one final feature that made the Macedonians almost impossible to beat.
Okay.
And these were what become called the companions, or basically the generals.
Right, because was that why it was like a companion cavalry?
Yeah. So
Philip, he was obviously, as we've said, a bit of a scrapper. He used to spend a lot of his time not with kind of fancy courtiers, but with the roughest, toughest soldiers.
The bad lads.
Right there in the army,
Oh, okay.
at kind of the forefront of all the action.
yeah, and these companions, they weren't just his mates. These were effectively experts in their field. They were very experienced, very well trained. When it came to fighting in battles, they knew exactly what to do, but also could adapt and think on their feet. And you needed the right people to tell everyone else what to do in order to make sure your battle plan works. I mean, they were effectively excellent military commanders in their own right.
Yeah, but like normally in situations like that, it's all like the toffs. They were kind of
Yeah, I mean,
charge,
they were
isn't it?
aristocrats, but not kind of
But
hanky aristocrats.
Yeah, but they weren't there just by birth. They could back it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
So it was really important that they had careful plans as Philip and later Alexander fought at the front of the cavalry wedge. Excuse me. So it's not like they could just turn around and give new orders midway through a battle.
Yeah.
They had to know what they were going to do before they actually went out to fight.
Right. Okay.
And you'd have to know what to do if something went wrong. So if you're the guy in charge of the infantry, you needed to know what you needed to do if something did go wrong, rather than just panicking. Oh, right, lads, turn around. They were effectively multiple generals
Right,
in
okay.
this army. But it is worth pointing out as well that it's like what you're saying. These guys could definitely back up their position in the army, not just that they were born into it. A lot of Alexander's key companions, who he takes on his campaigns, particularly people like Parmenio and Clytus the Black, these are Philip's mates. These are Philip's generals first, who he inherits. So that gives you an idea of just how well respected and how good they were.
So Alexander got like a ready-made army, just like hand me down from my dad.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So obviously there's a couple of key issues that, just to draw everything together, that Philip made some significant changes, which obviously helped him defeat the other Greeks with relative ease, but also meant he could develop warfare generally quite significantly. I mean, the obvious change we've pointed out was the sarissa.
The bigger, longer stick.
The bigger, longer, pointier stick. I mean, it seems like a simple thing, but it was really effective. Making your army a lot faster because they weren't wearing as much armour, also really important.
But I also think you cannot underestimate, and you see this when you think about like the British, the creation of Britain's first professional army as well. You cannot underestimate the importance and the value and the advantage of having a paid professional army.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they're getting paid for what they're doing, so they're going to work harder because they're going to want to not only survive, but they're also going to want to get paid.
Yeah,
and
you
get
can
better
work them
and-
harder if you
and move your
pay
way,
them.
move the way up, aren't they? So that's really important, and it means that they're more likely to take orders. And if you can get them and you can train them, and that is all that they're doing, then obviously they're going to be better
Yeah.
than everyone else.
I mean, the other kind of game changer in terms of this is the use of cavalry. I mean, the Persians had used cavalry for a long time, but it just wasn't really a thing that the Greeks had spent any real time thinking about. But then when the Macedonians go, horses, they're pretty handy, it does add this extra dimension to this army that Philip creates, and it does lead to a lot of his successes.
It shows that he's a really good kind of military tactician, doesn't it, and strategist.
Yeah, he's thinking about what he's doing rather than just getting stuck in.
He's taking the best bits from everyone else, and he's improving them even further out, integrating them into his own army so that he can use them.
Also helps that they've got lots and lots and lots of horses.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's kind of key.
That's important for cavalry.
Yeah, and like we said, ultimately, a lot of Alexander's military success, you could argue, is based on this army that Philip has created. You could, if you wanted to be contextuous, suggest that we could have put you in charge of the Macedonian army, James, and you'd have defeated the Greeks.
I'll give it a go.
Sick.
So, with him being hegemon of all the Greek armies, etc., does he hit this professional paid army? Are these all Macedonians, or does he get them from all over the place?
We're not 100% certain on that. The details are sketchy, but certainly you'd expect he would cherry pick the best soldiers to be put in the Macedonian army, which he can then use to do something like, I don't know, invade Persia, that kind of thing. Seems to be a bit of a Greek obsession.
A little bit.
So there you have it, our quick overview of the changes made by Philip to the Macedonian army. As always, thank you for listening. We hope it's been useful. Leave us a comment below, and until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.